Sekiro is somewhat old news at this point, winning Game of the Year 5 years ago, then sort of falling out of the spotlight soon after due to Elden Ring hype. Now, despite being the best FromSoft game, despite being overshadowed by Elden Ring, despite not getting a sequel because apparently Elden Ring is getting a Battle Royale, Sekiro still lives on in many hearts as one of the greatest games of all time, or more specifically, the greatest combat system of all time. But what if I told you that Sekiro developers aren't actually the people who concocted this brilliant fighting system? Mostly sarcasm, of course, since they quite literally did. But what I'm more intending to say is that there are actually some very interesting correlations with some older texts that might explain their inspiration. Because as the title states, Sekiro's combat system is arguably 400 years old. Why? Well, that's going to take a teensy bit of background info. Bear in mind, I'm not a history YouTuber, so you're getting the spark notes here, forgive any inaccuracies. Miyamoto Musashi was born in 1584 in feudal Japan. Little did his parents know at the time the child would grow up to be one of, if not the greatest swordsman history has ever known. Why? Because this mad lad had won more than 60 duels in his lifetime. 60! This dude soloed more than half a Fortnite match. For those of you youngins who need some relatable application, I can't even eat an entire pizza, let alone 60 of them, just to give you an idea of how crazy this is. After he grew older and gained a fair share of followers, Musashi retired to the wilderness to write his philosophies before he died. These writings are actually still readable today, the Book of 5 Rings, 5 relatively short sections that covered his combat style, worldview, etc. And for Elder Scrolls fans who've been subscribed to me for a while, there is actually a character based on Musashi named Frundar Hunding. He wrote a book called the Book of Circles, some clear inspiration there as well. So, as someone who loves history, I decided to give the Book of 5 Rings a shot, and safe to say, its contents had my jaw on the floor in just a few minutes. Why? Because this 400-year-old book, written by a legendary sword fighter, sounded incredibly familiar. Allow me to quote the first passage that stuck out. "There is timing in everything. Timing and strategy cannot be mastered without a great deal of patience." Timing is important in dancing and pipe music or string music, for they are in rhythm only if timing is good. Timing and rhythm are also involved in the military acts, shooting bows and guns and riding horses, and all skills and abilities. There are timing. Now, for anyone who's read about or played Sekiro, this should sound very familiar. In fact, many people actually like to affectionately refer to it as a rhythm game, due to the nature of its combat. But who knew the inspiration for a rhythm-based parry system was actually pioneered centuries before? It's pretty incredible, right? Like, imagine playing through the newest Mario game, only to learn that some dude from 1200 BC had written a treatise on his legendary fighting style of jumping atop an opponent's head. That's the kind of energy this gives off. Another quote goes as follows. "In single combat, the enemy sometimes loses timing and collapses. If you let this opportunity pass, he may recover and not be so negligent thereafter. Fix your eye upon the enemy's collapse and chase him, attacking so that you do not let him recover. You must do this." Just like how breaking the enemy's or your own posture bar will leave them open to an attack since you've interrupted their rhythm. Musashi also mentions how enemies will react to your rhythm and you to theirs, just like how enemies will change their attacks and parries based on how you're attacking them at the given moment. But I know what you're thinking. Okay, one pretty cool similarity, but that's not conclusive. Perhaps the quote is a little too broad to be considered, or it's not a direct inspiration, but maybe it's just a total coincidence. And to that I say, you're correct. If there weren't a few other examples, I'd be willing to say locks it in for certain. What are these examples? We'll look at the dang runtime of the video. We aren't exactly finished yet, so first I'll take a step away from the book for a little bit and we'll look at other aspects of the game I'd like to consider to prove my point. First and foremost, Wolf's character design. You might notice there are 2 pictures here, but one of them is actually not of Wolf and is instead of Miyamoto Musashi, as he appeared in the manga Vagabond to be exact. Notice the incredible similarity? Now, I'm not the first one to point out the likeness between these 2 characters, but I thought it was worth mentioning and noting the fact that Wolf already seems to have garnered inspiration from Musashi, or at least the pop culture appearance of Musashi. And if the protagonist is modeled after the historical figure, why not assume the combat system is of a similar evolution? One more out-of-book example I'd like to use is the fact that Musashi became a Kensei, which is an honorific term that translates to Sword Saint, which just so happens to be the name of one of the main characters. Though I will admit this title is often used enough historically that it might not necessarily be a direct parallel to Musashi's life, but I still found it interesting. Alright, side tangents notwithstanding, let's tackle a topic or two from the book of ours before we wrap things up. Because as if we needed more evidence, there's actually still quite a few other tidbits to this. Some dinos in the oatmeal. Does anyone get that joke? One of my favorite parts of Sekiro is the Makiri counter, an ability that lets you time a parry just so in order to stomp on your opponent's blade or spear right before they stab you to death. A legendary maneuver that takes guts, will, determination, courage, and skill. You have to stare death in the eyes and hold on just long enough to step onto the attack and drive it into the earth. Sort of like learning your girlfriend doesn't like it when you talk about Elder Scrolls lore the day before you propose to her, which is to say, waiting till the last second and dodging certain death. Anyway, as you can probably guess by now, this combat tactic was talked about in the Book of Five Rings. Musashi says how you should step on your opponent's sword in order to counter it, which is interesting because he says this in the water section of the book, and I've seen a source or two that suggests that Mikiri actually translates to spread like water. I have not verified these sources at all though, so don't sue me if they're total hogwash. The Mikiri counter is so amazing because it's the entire essence of the game culminating in a single mechanic. The slogan of the game that you get quite familiar with as the final boss tells it to you every single time you die, hesitation is defeat. And what do you know? The Book of Five Rings had some stuff to say on that topic as well. Musashi talks about how you must always stay in nothingness, or a complete sense of calm, and dare I say, that's when your best Sekiro gameplay comes out. Now don't get me wrong, I've had my fair share of cheek-clenching, red-faced, not-blinking, vein-bulging boss encounters in my day, but every time you get a solid no-hit run against a boss fight after hours of trying, it's just when you loosen up, enter the void, and lock the frick in. Not locked in by doing the gamer chair lean-forward maneuver, but by going into Zen mode and just letting yourself respond to the attacks from complete muscle memory and instinct. Though sometimes instinct will screw you because the occasional enemy will have a goofy combo that totally throws you through a loop. The best example I can think of is the giant, what are they called? Tarot troops, apparently. Just looked it up. They'll raise their club and fake you out like 3 or 4 times before slamming it down. So if you aren't careful, you just wiggle your sword trying to parry the attack that hasn't landed, sort of like a fish crying out for air. But would you believe it, Musashi is a few centuries ahead of us again because he tells us to fake out our enemies, to bait them, lure them, and as a master of this craft, as a master of baiting, I concur. Azura Guna reference. I think the funniest way Musashi employs this tactic is this recommendation. He states that you should never yell as you attack. I always like to imagine this as a cringy "Hi-ya!" But instead, you should yell right before you plan to attack. So the noise makes your opponent retaliate too soon, but your strike happens a bit after, which will catch them off guard. Alright. One last little nugget, bonus fry, extra coupon, reward points you didn't know you had, whatever you want to call it. Musashi says you should always be touching swords, which despite its low-key sus phrasing, is incredibly based advice. The biggest learning curve of playing Sekiro, especially when compared to other FromSoft games, was how you actually want to always be in active combat. So many other games are structured to make you dodge, avoid, and only strike every once in a while to whittle your opponent down. Which, I mean, come on, from a gameplay standpoint, is kind of boring. The combat system is literally built around me not fighting. Sekiro, though, the sooner you learn to mash swords with your opponent like an ancient Greek on a ship with his male bros, the sooner you can excel. The gameplay is entirely based around you and how you should attack relentlessly, parrying, attacking, parrying, moving in, taking advantage, counter, attack, attack, attack. You're never just running in circles waiting for the enemy to finish their random move, other than some bosses, stupid frickin' blazing bull. But yes, a big piece of advice that many Reddit threads tout is how you should never let up, always be locked in direct combat, just like Musashi told us all those years ago. So my overall point? Geez, I hope you would know by now. You literally knew it before even clicking on the video, assuming I keep the title the same as what I'm planning it to be. But I hope I've been able to convince you that Sekiro's combat system is actually inspired by the legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi and his Book of Five Rings. And even if you don't believe me, we can still enjoy the time we spent having a nice excuse to talk about history, video games, and a little memes along the way. Because at the end of the day, whether it was a direct inspiration or not, Musashi's advice still rings true after 400 or so years. Who knew that reading a philosophical book could make you better at digital sword fighting? So go ahead, find a PDF, audiobook, or whatever you use to read. As you can guess, the book is public domain, and it's only a few hours long to listen to, so it's a very easy read. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this random deep dive I've been cooking up for a few months. Big thanks to our Taco Trooper channel members who voted for this video. Though since we only have one right now, the elections are extremely rigged. All hail Frog Wizard. Want to help democracy and combat their reign of terror? Guess you have to click the link below and become a Taco Trooper yourself. Jokes aside, big thanks to you guys and thank you for watching. Here's the people who answered the question at the end of last video. Answer today's question and you'll be featured at the end of the next one. What's your favorite sword? It can be a type of sword, a specific version, fictional, real, whatever. That's all, my friends. Like and subscribe if you want more Taco PNGs talking at you through a screen. Have a spectacular day, and have a spectacular day no matter how many years it takes you to beat Blazing Bull. Talk out. Oh, wow. It's been a while since I used that one. Still just as cringe as I remember it, though.